Start the stream. What's up? What's up? Welcome back. Salut, bonjour, bonsoir to everyone out there. Um, this is actually my second time trying this out. All right, my second time. I didn't have my mic connected the first time, and so some of you may have tuned in, may not have tuned in, and perhaps most of you are offline at this point, but we're still gonna make it happen. You feel me? So anyway, and I had to put my son to bed, and he was stubborn tonight. Normally he falls asleep fairly quickly. But as you might have seen the title by now, this should be an interesting discussion, and I'll keep it brief. I won't be very long. I may not stay on long enough to chat, but it doesn't look like there's anyone to chat with, so that is just fine. Okay, so the question is, have you ever wondered why, despite relentless efforts, heartfelt conversations amongst each other with family and friends, etc., and seemingly endless government initiatives, church initiatives, religious initiatives, race initiatives, etc., progress in our community feels painfully slow? I'm starting to think about this. Perhaps it is not a question of personal mindset, right? Like we seem to say, we seem to think, we seem to feel. Many of us who think we've gotten it right, or we think we understand how things work, we always point out externally, right? We always point at other people within our community, within our circles, our family, who are doing the wrong things, right? And how they're a poor reflection maybe on the collective. But is it possible that, like I said, it isn't a question of personal mindset or personal motivation? Perhaps it's something a bit more, insidious that's lurking beneath the surface. Maybe it's something that's invisible. I mean, yet I think we'd all agree that it's powerful. That is quietly directing the narratives that we as Black people live by. If you've ever found yourself asking, what the hell is really going on? This conversation might change your perspective, your entire perspective. Okay. Enter the term, and some of you may have heard it before, but authority bias. Some people would refer to it as a type of hidden puppet master. And authority bias sounds simple enough. I mean, you could put it together, authority bias. Any of you who have studied cognitive biases and heuristics and things of that nature. But it's when we trust and accept information merely because it comes from someone who seems authoritative or credible, someone with a lab coat on, or a pastor's robe, or glasses, right? And because they have the uniform, or because they're in the position of authority, we bypass all critical thought entirely, right? And on the surface, you could argue that it's a pretty straightforward psychological quirk. As a matter of fact, too, I'll interject this before I forget. There's a book by Robert Cialdini. I don't have it behind me, but there's a book by Robert Cialdini. Depends on how you you choose to pronounce it. But he wrote a book about influence. And this is one of the initial 6, but now 7 influences or principles of influence on people and human behavior. Authority is one of them, if not the most important. It could be. You could argue if you were to rank the 7, authority would be pretty high up on that scale. Okay, so the authority bias is what we're going to be talking about today. And perhaps I'm arguing that It is the reason why black people or black folk are still stuck like Chuck in 2025. Okay. But I want you to consider this. What if authority bias is more than individual gullibility? Like I said, many of us think that it's individuals, bad apples that are kind of ruining the bunch, right? But what if it becomes something that's more than the individual, goes beyond the individual? What if it becomes truly lethal when it infiltrates an entire community? What if it's a top-down thing, a top-down phenomena? At scale, authority bias doesn't just affect individual opinions. It shapes collective truths, quietly embedding toxic narratives so deeply that, these narratives are never even challenged. And if they are, people just seem weird. I'll give you an example. Let me take a little sip. I'll give you an example. Many of the people we consider weird, Hotep, Negroes, and vegan brothers, and Dr. Sebi, and things of that nature, these are all novelties within our community, right? We kind of treat them as such, right? We treat them as black in some way, but also abnormal. We treat them as fringe. And we see them not as toxic or anything like that, but we don't see our normal natural behaviors and proclivities as toxic. And that's when I go back to the toxic narratives and how they're never challenged, right? Think about it like this too. In that same vein, growing up, and I'll just speak for me, right? I didn't explicitly hear the words, "You can't achieve greatness outside sports or entertainment," right? Yet, I would say everywhere that I looked, whether it be movies, music, videos, magazines, even conversations around the dinner table, they reinforced this limiting idea. As a matter of fact, I had opportunities that I did not take, that I did not see through, because I really felt more connected with other ideas of greatness, right? I was on a path to greatness in many things, to be honest, as a young man. But as I said before, that wasn't the greatness that I saw pedestalized and lauded in my community. My parents did, but I'm talking about as a collective, right? And that affects how people, that's going to affect your pursuits, right? The authoritative voices I trusted implicitly communicated that black success, and it doesn't mean my parents, I'm talking about outside of my parents, but black success had a specific face, right? It was flashy, it was immediate, it was visible, but it was overwhelmingly tied to athletics and entertainment. It was flashy, it was big into aesthetics and how things looked, right? It was very superficial. And the quiet assumption was that other pathways, right? Business leadership, scientific breakthroughs, technological innovation, these were somehow not seen as aligning with our natural talents, or simply not suited to our cultural strengths. It doesn't mean that I didn't see people in those roles. I just didn't see them enough, and they weren't prominent enough, right? To impress or create a stamp into my psyche, right? It doesn't mean they didn't exist. It just means that there were more dominant ideas and archetypes in my mind. Okay. Now, here's the catch. These narratives were not merely verbal. They were visual, right? And authority bias doesn't just speak, it paints pictures. Okay. And the visuals don't argue. They seduce. They seduce you, man. They definitely seduce you. So images of gleaming cars and beautiful black women, dressed scantily, in front of clubs, dancing on poles, extravagant clothing, uh, Gucci shoes, champagne in the club, you know, and immediate displays of wealth, yachts, Jay-Z on the yacht shaking champagne on beautiful black women or beautiful women. This is arguable whether or not they were all black, but beautiful women on the yacht, you know what I mean? Doing whatever he wanted to do, right? This became a standard for success, subtly dictating not only what seemed achievable, but defining my personal desires and what I considered worthy. Okay? What I considered worthy. That became the template for value. And keep that in mind as a juxtaposition. Okay? I didn't see any other images beyond that. I mean, that was like, man, I was conditioned to believe that those were the things that meant success, that meant you had made it. You know what I mean? And even, up until probably very recently. And when I say very recently, like I'm 45, so maybe 10 years ago, right? That started to fade once I had children and things. But these visuals didn't just limit my possibilities. They literally set the boundaries for my appetite, my ambitions, my social status. And beyond that, they tethered me to a certain set of conversations. They groomed my reactions to certain things that happened in the world and subtly shaped the ways in which I would respond, right? They subtly shaped the ways in which I interacted with the world around me. Now, let's deepen the paradox a little bit further. Consider how many of us grew up seeing God, right, consistently portrayed as a white man nonetheless that doesn't stand beside you, in front of you, behind you, but is above you in the clouds. Not only is he above you, he's above the sky itself, above the earth, the planet, outside of the universal reality that we know of. Unseen, yet felt, yet seen, right? And this wasn't merely, like people think, this isn't merely an artistic choice. It's an authority bias on a profound psychological scale. And even to this day, I think people who were not included in that image have a hard time putting themselves in that picture. They have a hard time making God or Jesus or whatever that thing they worship. They have a hard time making it a black thing. It's very difficult. It's, very difficult. So by repeatedly associating ultimate authority, purity, and perfection with whiteness, society quietly implants a hierarchy in your subconscious mind. For those of us not reflected in that image too, the consequences are pretty severe, right? Silent messages of inferiority, alienation, and unworthiness. Our identities are quietly colonized by an outsider's image of divinity, undermining our own sense of intrinsic value and authority, right? I want you to think about that. How, because the ultimate good is seen in that way, much of what you embody physically, we try and erase, right? It's one of the reasons for a lot of, it's the reason for a lot of things. It's the reason for a lot of things. And I want you to also think about this conversation as we have it. Think about how it spills over into other conversations, the red pill community, marriage, male-female relationships, etc. I want you to think about this authority bias, right? And I'll try and point some other things out as I go along and as they come up. But here's where it gets even more sinister. We talked about God being white, but here's where it gets even more sinister. when parts of ourselves are of ourselves, our authentic interest, our dreams, our authentic ambitions, right, are repeatedly labeled as bad or inappropriate by these authoritative messages, right? And it's nuanced, it's a subtle thing. We start viewing these parts of ourselves as foreign, as shameful, even traitorous, right? We start seeing ourselves this way. How does that factor into maybe black on black crime? How does that factor into continental Africans' relationship on the continent, one, but also their relationships with African Americans or blacks in the diaspora? You know, you start to think about, why is it that we can't get along? What is going on? Right? And so reconnecting with these lost or suppressed aspects feels uncomfortable. It feels unnatural. Like I said, foreign, sometimes even dangerous, right? It becomes easier to abandon them entirely rather than face the inner turmoil of reclaiming them. Okay? People would just rather move forward. Hey, man, it's been done. You can't get it back. People would rather do that than, press forward. So I want you to ask yourself, and it's going to be a weird question, so it's about to get a little weird. But how do you feel about voodoo? How do you feel about candomblé, hoodoo, ifa, iha, aha, fa? How do you feel about the word Zulu, right? How do you feel about these things, right? And now this isn't a call to convert to anything or anything like that, but rather it's an exercise to test your conditioned reactions. Notice your immediate feelings and impulses. Are they negative? Are they skeptical? Are they dismissive? How do you feel? Right? And here's the interesting part. And you know this to be true, even though you've aligned yourself with the authority that is white and right. There's something deep down inside you that is running away from that other side because it has been aligned with what is wrong. By excluding you from the pictures and the iconography of the church, so to speak, right? By excluding you from that picture, from that frame, you know that you are still in the other frame, and that other frame has been portrayed as bad or primitive, right? These automatic reactions aren't accidental. They're carefully constructed by narratives that portray anything outside the dominant authority as wrong, as bad, as primitive, as aboriginal, right? And this exercise just reveals how deeply we've internalized beliefs aligned with whiteness and a divine white authority. Subtly guiding our acceptance of what is good and acceptable, and discouraging reconnection with parts of our cultural identity that have been historically stigmatized or misunderstood. Right? There is, in a few of us, there's an impulse to go deeper, to look for something more. There's a feeling that there is a Truman Show, right? That we're on display. We're in a zoo of some sort. That there's something ain't right. Right? And this is the true heart of the problem. This, in my opinion, is the bottleneck. This is the constraint. This is the point of paralysis. Authority bias at scale doesn't merely limit what we believe is achievable. It actively discourages reconnecting with our authentic selves, creating internal psychological divisions that further lock us into short-term survival modes and prevent meaningful long-term growth, right? I don't know if you guys can see that, but, how do you move forward if you're following someone else all the time. Or if someone else, their move is it's like back in the day when they used to teach people how to do the waltz, right? They put the little feet and the big feet on the floor, and they play the music, and you have to step on the foot in order to do the dance the correct way. Um, you're following a pattern. You are utilizing a type of scaffolding, right? That you don't own the patent to. You don't you don't understand which structures you should use the scaffolding for, where it's inadequate, how much weight it can hold, etc. That's what it's kind of like, right? That's the authority bias at this point. You don't know how far you can push it because it's not yours and it's not meant for whatever it is you're trying to build. So collectively, this entrenched authority bias doesn't just shape what we desire, it shapes who we become as a community. And it pushes us toward a fleeting, superficial validation, trapping us in cycles of immediate gratification at the expense of sustainable and intergenerational success. Now, just to wrap this thing up, fortunately, awareness can disrupt the hidden machinery, right? And so in my next live, what I would like to do is unpack precisely how these harmful beliefs become viral in a way, or how they became viral. There's still new ideas, right? There's still new ideas that kind of piggyback on the old ones. It's almost like we're reinventing something. But we've got to get at the heart. We got to get to the heart of the message. And that message is who we are and what we should be identified with, what our proclivities are, like I said, our appetites, what satisfies us and makes us great. Those things have new words and new terms, but that is ultimately what's being spread effortlessly throughout our communities, embedding themselves deeply into our collective psyche, right? And most importantly, what we'll do is we'll discuss tangible, powerful ways to maybe dismantle some of these narratives and reclaim our future, right? So stay tuned. Stay tuned. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. I don't think I saw anybody coming in. I'm still waiting for somebody to chat with. Every time I go live, I guess I'm not popular enough. But I'm still waiting for someone to chat with. So next time, hopefully, some of you will join me. But if not, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. I will be listening, and I do appreciate your time.